Nakumicha Wafula. We have Jerome. We have Lala from COP29 presidency. We have Ambassador Antonio from the Brazil Ministry of Cities. Thank you, colleagues. I would call Ambassador Nakuminja to take us through the first session of this program. This way. Would you want to come this side?
Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to warmly welcome you to this session that is being hosted by Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, personally, I'm delighted to join you in this session as we convene to discuss the support and implementation of building climate resilience for the urban poor, that is BCRUP initiative, which is a flagship project that has gained global recognition since its inception in 2019. We recall the pivotal role played by Kenya and Brazil at the formative phase of the program, as well as key partner organizations, including UN Habitat mandate to provide technical support. Today's focus further forged strong actionable collaborations to drive this initiative forward and ensure we deliver transformative impacts to the most vulnerable urban populations at local, regional, and global levels by leveraging financing as a means of implementation. Excellencies, esteemed partners, allow me to brief you on the progress that we have made so far on this initiative. One is that we did launch the BCRUP strategy by His Excellency the President of Kenya, President William Ruto, in September 2023 during the Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi. There was a memorandum of understanding between the government of Kenya and United Cities and local governments signed in June 2023 on cooperation in the implementation of the BCRUP program. There is also recognition by AMCEN in the 19th session of the African Ministerial Conference on Environment in August 2023. Adoption of the 10-year implementation plan was done in December 2023 at COP28 in Dubai. This plan provides a comprehensive roadmap for the initiative's implementation, outlining key actions and timelines. Mobilization of pilot countries was launched by the pilot countries participating in the pilot phase of BCRUP. The Africa Green Climate Finances National Designated Authorities Network was designated to coordinate with Green Climate Fund, national designated authorities towards regional readiness, development, and implementation. Establishment of the BCRUP Task Force and an inaugural session of the African Urban Forum on September 2024 integrated BCRUP as a flagship program for Africa cities in its declaration. There was a high-level mobilization for BCRUP program at the 12th session of the World Urban Forum and COP29 in Baku. The primary outcome at COP29 was the launch and the fundraising campaign to mobilize and bridge financing gap towards the roll-up of BCRUP program over the initial 10-year implementation phase. And lastly, development of a robust governance structure, operational framework, and resource mobilization strategy that will guide the long-term implementation process of the BCRUP program. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, today's meeting will need to underscore the need for coherence in various programs and initiatives with a commitment to organize a high-level dialogue towards mobilization and meeting the financing gap, the BCRUP program. Finally, I look forward to productive discussions on how we can further strengthen our collaboration and propose meaningful contributions on the potential areas for partnership towards the BCRUP framework, particularly on meeting the financing gap. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with those remarks, welcome to this session. And I would like to take a few minutes to welcome Ambassador Salwin to come and give us his remarks. I'm told you're still with us, but Jerome would like to step out and therefore would like to invite him to give some remarks. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, it's an honor to host you today at the World Green Economy Organization Pavilion for this important dialogue on mobilizing the means of implementation to advance the building climate resilience with the Urban Poor Program, BCRUP. On behalf of the World Green Economy Organization, I would like to commend the leadership of the BCRUP partners and the government of Kenya for their steadfast commitment to this vital initiative, one that truly embodies the spirit of inclusivity, equity, and action that Paris Agreement goals. As global urbanization accelerates, we must face an undeniable truth. The front line of climate change is urban, and the most vulnerable are the urban poor. Those least responsible for the crisis bear burden from intensified floods and heat waves to loss of livelihood and displacement. Addressing this injustice requires not only compassion but also innovation and in financing, governance, and partnership. In this regard, the BCRUP initiative is an inspiring example, translating global climate ambition into local impact. Its focus on climate resilient urban development, adequate houses, and inclusive adaptation planning the kind of integrated approach that WGO strongly advocates for. Global warming is real, as you can see from my face. At the World Green Economy Organization, we believe that resilience and sustainability must go hand in hand with economic opportunity. By investing in the resilience of the urban poor, we are not only protecting lives, but also creating jobs, driving innovation, and fostering social inclusion, all of which strengthen the fabric of our cities and economy. Let us use this gathering not only to discuss the challenges, but also to mobilize collective will, political, financial, and institutional, to make BCRUP a global model for urban resilience. Together, we can transform vulnerability into opportunity and ensure that the path to net zero is also a path to dignity, equity, and shared prosperity. Thank you.
May we now invite Your Excellency.
Good afternoon to all of you. And first, let me thank my colleagues and friends from the government of Kenya, as well as my colleagues from UN Habitat and from the World Bank and the World Green Economy Summit team as well. The climate battle will be won or lost in cities and towns. Urban areas are where risks concentrate, populations grow, and vulnerabilities deepen. And the Building Climate Resilience for the Urban Poor initiative must therefore continue to stand as a flagship vehicle for delivering resilience where it is most urgently needed. And I note that this initiative, Ambassador, as you correctly said, was launched at a summit held by the UN Secretary General in 2019. I wasn't there then, but if I was there, I'm sure that I would have supported it as well. But it was launched, and this initiative continues to grow. Friends, COP30 must launch a decade of acceleration and implementation. And the leadership of mayors and local authorities will be essential. So please allow me to propose three important priorities moving forward. We know that the 1.5-degree goal is still possible, but it is slipping out of reach, and a temporary overshoot is inevitable. It is absolutely crucial that we make that temporary overshoot temporary, but as short and as safe as possible. Cities are already raising the bar and showing that what credible 1.5 aligned climate action looks like. This means confronting the root causes of the climate crisis by rapidly slashing emissions, but also treating resilience as the foundation for economic inclusion, human security, and social stability. Cities cannot deliver on emission reductions or resilience without infrastructure. And therefore, the investments in infrastructure that cities will need to make over the coming years must be to support our efforts to reduce emissions, but also to build resilience. Secondly, COP30 must deliver an ambitious outcome on adaptation finance. And adaptation finance is the lifeblood of urban resilience. Without it, cities simply cannot protect their citizens. Yet adaptation finance remains a fraction of what is needed. So we need to ensure that adaptation finance is scaled up, one, and secondly, that cities and local authorities have access to adaptation finance. And the third priority is really a simple one. We live in an age of geopolitical uncertainty and divisions, and it is critical that local leaders and mayors build bridges among local leaders around the world. Cities and local authorities and mayors, you're doers, you're first movers, you want to get the job done. So we urge you to simply to reach across the developing country divide, the north-south divides, really, and build bridges among each other around some of the critical solutions needed to protect your people while also addressing the climate crisis. So, friends, the climate struggle or the climate crisis will not be won in plenary halls or even in hot pavilions like this at COPs. It will be won in homes, it will be won in our streets, and it will be won in our communities. So I urge you to keep pushing. The United Nations stands with you. Our colleagues at UN Habitat, they are the dedicated UN system entity to work with you and engage you. And I know Anna Claudia and her fantastic team, who incidentally are based in Nairobi, close to home, will be working on this agenda in an extremely active way in the coming years. So from the Office of the Secretary General, we're fully behind you. We're fully supportive of this effort. You will always get our political support, and let's ensure that as we leave COP30, we leave inspired and energized to ensure that the next decade is truly a decade of implementation and a decade of acceleration. So thank you so much. And apologies, but I have to rush off. But I had to be here to support my brothers and sisters from Kenya. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for your encouraging words. It now gives us a pleasure to invite the representative of the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan and the COP29 lead negotiators representative of Republic of Azerbaijan. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As you can see, that's not me. Mr. Yalchin is sadly not being able to attend, but he sends his regards. On behalf of COP29 presidency, we're extremely honored to be here to support our friends from Kenya, UN Habitat, and Brazil. It is a pleasure to join this important dialogue on building climate resilience with the urban poor, and we welcome this initiative as a real example of how the global climate process can translate commitments into tangible outcomes for people on the ground. During COP29 in Baku, we made a collective promise through the COP29 declaration on MAP, multi-sectoral action pathways to resilient and healthy cities, reaffirming that sustainable, inclusive and climate resilient urbanization must be at the heart of the both mitigation and adaptation strategies. We established the Baku Continuity Coalition, a platform aiming to link global negotiations with local implementation to connect efforts from previous and future COP processes, ensure that urban climate action remains consistent, coherent, and collaborative. Kenya's BCRUP program is deeply aligned with our vision, a model that transforms high-level policy aspirations into a neighborhood-level resilience and social justice. At COP29, Paris achieved Baku Climate Unity Pact and advanced a new collective quantified goal on climate finance. These outcomes underscore a vital message. A resilience will only be achieved when climate finance reaches the communities that need it the most. Those living in informal settlements, peri-urban areas, and climate-vulnerable neighborhoods. Initiatives like these embody the principle by empowering local authorities and citizens to drive adaptation from the bottom up. Further, under the Baku Finance Goal, parties launched the Baku to Belem roadmap to guide the collective efforts towards scaling climate finance for developing countries to at least $1.3 trillion per year by 2035, with the presidencies recently issuing a report on the roadmap. The roadmap reminds us that scaling climate finance is not only about reaching a new global target, it's about ensuring that resources flow predictably, affordably, and directly to the most that exposed to climate impacts. It emphasizes strengthening country-driven priorities, improving access to communities, and shaping financial systems that reduce the cost of capital for developing countries. As we look ahead, World Urban Forum next year in Baku, under the theme of housing the world, safe and resilient cities and communities, which I'm sure our friends from UN Habitat will be talking a lot about, we see an opportunity to advance the shared vision with our friends from Kenya, Brazil, all the BCRUP partners by working together to build a bridge between COP30 and WIF13 and other urban initiatives. As we saw at COP30, urban resilience is at the center of climate action agenda. By aligning our coalitions and initiatives, we can ensure that no community is left behind and that climate ambition translates into healthier, safer, and more equitable cities for all. Thank you so much.
Ms. Hikmat, thank you so much for your input. It now gives me the pleasure to invite His Excellency Ambassador Antonio Francisco da Costa e Silvio Neto, NDC Partnership Director of Operations. The floor is yours. Yes, please.
I'm not the NDC Partnership Director of Operations. I am the Chief International Advisor of the Ministry of Cities, The Ministry of Cities of Brazil works basically with urban policies. We are particularly dedicated to the urban poor, and therefore we are particularly engaged in the building resilience for the urban poor, both nationally and internationally. The Ministry of Cities of Brazil has a vice ministerial area that dedicated exclusively to informal settlements and urban poor, with a program that has spent already about $3 billion in policies related to reurbanization of slums, protection for disasters, and specifically land tenure regularization, which is for informal settlements in Brazil a significant task. We do believe, and we have been working since COP28 to make sure that these dimensions related to the urban poor and fully incorporated in the discussions within COP30 and with the both axes in terms of integrating urban policies in the discussions on mitigation, adaptation, just transition, and certainly means of implementation, which is the part related to funding, which we think is critical. I was particularly happy to listen to Mr. Selvinswat, recalling the need for fund in terms of adaptation of cities and the central role that cities have in terms of both mitigation, adaptation, and a transformation of our climate crisis into potential solutions. We are particularly keen, as you have seen in the ministerial that we hosted on 11th on Tuesday, on making sure that both dimensions, the multi-level governance dimension, meaning empowering local governments, regional and local governments into the climate agenda on the one hand, and on the other hand, including urban policies, and particularly those urban policies that address vulnerabilities and inequalities are relevant. We are certainly engaged in trying to see how we upgrade the initiative that we share with Kenya for the urban poor. I think building resilience for the urban poor is a critical call to action. Brazil has developed for this COP a plan to accelerate solutions for the urban poor that obviously is focused on our own area of the urban poor, which has a dimension on racial inequality that for Latin America and the Caribbean, and particularly for Brazil, is critical. So we're trying to work a plan to accelerate solution that relates both to the urban poor and to racial discrimination. We have already sat down with Kenya to see how we can incorporate BCRUP into this particular action, so we actually strengthen both initiatives with this dialogue. And so I'm very hopeful that we will move forward strongly in terms of working in favor of the urban poor within the resilient climate agenda. Thank you very much.
Very much. Your Excellency, thank you very much. We now have the opportunity to listen to Mr. Robert Sangora, the Deputy Director. Just a second. Robert Sangora, Deputy Director of Urban Governance, Management and Resilience, BCRUP Initiative. Mr. Sangora, the floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I want to make a very short presentation on the program so that we connect the conversation from the high-level statement which have been provided to the implementation process that we are looking forward towards. And so, as has been mentioned, building climate resilience with urban poor is an initiative that has its origin from the UN Climate Action Summit of 2019, from where the UN Secretary General invited or requested Kenya and Brazil to lead this process, and it responds to the IPCC, alarming reports on climate change impacts, adaptation, and vulnerabilities, with particular focus on cities and climate change nexus. We also would wish to state that the aspect of scalability and accelerating the implementation process is key to achieving the balance of both mitigation and adaptation within the urban spaces and cities development pathways in general. I want to bring out that we are focusing on 4 work packages, or whatever we call, what then we can have as pillars. The resilient communities and infrastructure is the core of the program development and implementation process. And this is where the core of resilient is built. But it is supported by 3 enabling frameworks in terms of mobilizing of finance, capacity building, knowledge management, sharing, and reporting. And the 4th aspect, or the 3rd enabling aspect, on cooperation and partnership, which then supports the process of achieving the level of means of implementation that are desired. But again, in terms of the aspect of the first technical, work package that we presented in terms of resilient communities and infrastructure, this is further looked into 6 outcome areas. And so, starting with the hotspot identification, profiling, and mapping, with intention to have climate risk and vulnerability assessment for targeted interventions, which takes us to the core of resilient, becomes the first outcome area. But then, once the urban poor neighborhoods are identified, then we look at the aspect of planning. How do we come up with resilient urban spatial plans, which then mitigates against the fragile ecosystem where the urban poor, in most instances, do occupy. But then, after planning process, what do we do with the existing settlement? What do we do with existing arrangement as they are? So the issue of resilient urban basic services, in terms of resilient infrastructure, whether resilient, housing, green social housing, all these put together then are looked at in that 3rd, outcome area. And so the 4th outcome area, because the first 3 are largely looking at space, we have not touched about the people. So how do we empower the people? So the aspect of green urban economy, green jobs, livelihood strategies, then is looked into outcome number 4 of this program. And then, of course, what is the connection of those best practices arising from the 4 areas with the Paris Agreement, the 1.5-degree goal, which Ambassador Cilmate talked about earlier. And so the aspect of strengthening national determined contributions, NDC urban dimension, then becomes critical in terms of the databases and greenhouse gas, emission inventories. And then the last aspect is on governance framework, which is also core in terms of connecting the national government, local government, all the stakeholders into the conversation. And so the 6 areas that we looked for, and what the first speaker, Ambassador Nakomicha from Kenya, presented on the strategy that was launched in COP28 in Dubai. This is the initial costing that we are looking forward, and this forms the bulk of the convention that we are having. So each country, in terms of the pilot for the first 10 years, we are looking at a cost of around $474 million to start the pipeline projects at the local level. And so, depending on how many countries have come on board, then you can see the arithmetic in terms of the numbers we are looking for during the 10-year phase that we are starting to implement the program, which then will be reviewed to take us to a more proactive way of seeing the actual adaptation and resilient costs that we are looking at in this process. And so this is part of how we are looking at the actors in the space and the convention in terms of the contributions that can be mobilized from these actors. Right from the multilateral donors, we are having the internal budget processes at the country level when we institute the processes, the role of the private sector, and all the actors involved in the process in terms of the contributions that we are looking towards to support the means of implementation, mobilization that we are looking towards. And so, of course, as we said, it's a multi-country process, multi-sectoral, and of course, multi-stakeholder process. As you look at the urban space, every actor in this room or outside should find their way into this conversation, as most speakers, have put, and as we have put outside there. But then, bottom line, we are looking at scalability and replicability, and this is what takes us to both all the subnational in one country and, of course, replicating to other countries at the global level. And then we, of course, we talked about piloting and invitation to 20 African countries who have been invited to be part of this process, and the designing of a readiness project jointly with the GCF, which is ongoing. So these are the countries that we have invited to be part of the process of the pilot of the program. And in terms of the selection, we are saying that across board, there is need to be fair in terms of balancing the selection of the urban poor neighborhoods. We have major cities, we have intermediate cities, and also we have, of course, some rural towns. They also suffer the consequence of climate change, so we should not leave them behind. So we have a rationale of which a criteria that has been set for the pilot phase. That cost that we have talked about, it's for the urban poor, 60 urban poor neighborhoods in each country, and this is the criteria. There's a set criteria to select the 60 urban neighborhoods in the pilot phase of the program. And so some of the key next steps, as I wind up, is of course the rollout of the program across board in all regions, since it is a global program, and of course looking how to enhance the mobilization of the resources to take us to the desired level of means of implementation that we desire, which of course targets financing, technology transfer, and capacity building processes across board, and of course the linkage of the subnational conversation and a clear invitation to all subnational regions to be part of this process. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite our distinguished speakers for the next panel. It gives me a pleasure to invite Ms. Valerie Hickey, the Global Director of the Climate Change Group at World Bank. Ms. Hickey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Forgive the disorganization. It is very hot. For those folks who are standing in the back, this is not for the weak, and nor is climate change. And I really do want to reiterate what His Excellency Selwyn said, which is the battle for climate change will be won or lost in cities. But the truth is, the battle for many things will be won or lost in cities, including the war on poverty, the search for growth. When President Ruto held the first Africa Climate Summit, and when Prime Minister Abiy held the second one a few months ago, there was a common thread, and it was that particularly for sub-Saharan Africa, climate change can't just be about the threats, it has to be about the opportunities. And this is incredibly important, and that's why this partnership is so important, and I really do congratulate the government of Kenya and UN Habitat for doing it together. Because the infrastructure that will exist in 2050, almost half of it hasn't been built yet. And 80% of that is going to be in developing economies and low-income countries in the global south. And most of that is going to be in cities. And it's not just about the infrastructure, it's about the services that come with the infrastructure. Because it's no good having a house if there is no air conditioning or energy to attach it to. It's no good having access to infrastructure that allows you to get on a bus if you have no job to go to. And that's why at the World Bank, for us, our investments in cities isn't just about the infrastructure, it's about sites and services. And we're very proud to be investing, putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to making sure that cities are at the forefront of our fight against climate change and fight for an opportunity agenda, fight for growth. This past year, we invested 48%, almost $50 billion of development finance that qualified as climate finance. In the past 5 years, 1 out of every $5 we've invested has been invested for cities, and that doesn't count the money we're invested in the larger energy grids, the larger infrastructure grids, the social protection systems, the education or health that are important to the people in cities, but just to cities themselves. That's amounted to over $33 billion in 5 years. And of that, we're beginning to see that investment grow faster. Just in 2020, we put less than $3.5 billion into cities. Last year, it was almost $10 billion. We're putting in more as this realization that cities are where the opportunities are. In our investment, we really have learned three things that I want to share with you very quickly today. The first one is that no matter how much money we're spending, no matter how much money countries themselves are spending, which is enormous, we need private capital. We must mobilize private capital, and that's why blended finance remains critically important, as does capital coordination, making sure that domestic finance, international public finance coming from MDBs like the World Bank or the Africa Development Bank are lined up exactly to de-risk for the private sector, to create equity positions so the private sector comes in, to create the enabling conditions that bring the private sector in, because quite simply, we cannot solve this problem and take advantage of the opportunities that cities give us without private capital. And we've done this. When the capital is coordinated, it works. For every $1 we have put into housing, in particular in Egypt, we've been able to attract $6 from the private sector. In the Dominican Republic, for every $1 we've put into housing, we're getting $10 from the private sector. And housing is the foundational investment. Everybody needs a house to go to, a house hopefully with air conditioning or heating, a house with access to that bus route to get to a good job, and a good job you can come home from in the evening and sit down and have a fridge full of food. That's what our investments are about, and that's what we need private capital investing in. Our second lesson is we can't talk about cities without talking about the surrounds and the countryside outside. In the Congo Basin, 130 million housing units are going to be built in the next 5 years. We need wood for that. That wood is not going to come from the cities, it's going to come from the countryside and the surrounds. How do we make that an economic engine to make sure that people can stay in the countryside and supply the goods and services necessary for people in the city, so cities don't become too overwhelmed too quickly? And the third lesson is why we're all here today, which is the power of partnership. It's the partnership across ministries. It's the partnership across jurisdictions between national ministries and local jurisdictions, local municipalities. It's the power of partnership across the public and private sector, and it's the power of partnership with development partners. That's why we are so proud to stand with the government of Kenya, with UN Habitat, and with everybody who is fighting the good fight to make cities the engine of opportunity to take advantage of the new industrial revolution and make sure that every opportunity is resilient against a warming world. Thank you very much.
Ms. Ike, thank you very much for a very inspiring message, and we all hear what you're saying. Systemic approach, partnerships, dialogue. And now it gives me a pleasure to invite Mr. Carlos de Freitas, Executive Director of FMDV, to kindly deliver his input.
Indeed, it's better here. We should all join the stage. Sorry. Okay, so thank you so much for convening this important dialogue. I think what strikes me here is the regional spirit of solidarity between the different countries that have engaged and committed to support the methodology of the BCRUP to be implemented at the national level. And I think it resonates a lot with the fact that we know that no country alone can build resilience, especially in Africa. We are all connected. So I think the spirit of the BCRUP is very relevant, very innovative. And I think that it builds the foundations, it can build the foundations of the national architecture for localizing finance that we need. I see BCRUP as a catalyst somehow at the national level that might help us having clearer coordination between ministries, cities, and national development banks, and of course some national development banks, better prepared local project pipelines, and over time, I hope country platforms for localizing finance. I think this is a demonstration that we can go to the last mile of climate finance and ensure investments actually reach vulnerable neighborhoods. We have seen in Cameroon and Madagascar that when governments, local governments, national governments, local governments, public development banks are around the same table, it becomes possible to move from pilot projects to coherent national systems on the side of the conversation we have on decentralization that is a huge blockage at the national level usually in our countries in Africa. Our intention here is quite modest but constructive to echo the momentum created by BCRUP and to encourage countries to see it as an opportunity to lay the first bricks of this national architecture, ones that can later be scaled through regional solidarity and international financing. In that sense, today's discussion is not the end point, but the seed of a long-term effort to make cities and territories resilient, inclusive, and adequately financed. And we would like to celebrate Kenya's leadership again, and we will be here to support your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doferitas. And now it gives me a pleasure to invite the representative of UNEP, Mr. Martin Kraus, the director of the Climate Change Department. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues, partners, excellencies, participants. You know, UNEP is an agency with its headquarters actually in Nairobi, in Kenya. And in UNEP, we are very much committed to be working on programs that are supporting, on the one hand, sustainable urban development, especially for the urban poor, such as in Kenya, and on the other hand, also the same initiatives that have a positive climate impact. We are grateful to be working closely with the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development of Kenya, and jointly with our sister agency, which also has its headquarters in Kenya, in Nairobi, in Kenya, which is of course UN Habitat. UNEP and UN Habitat have a special relationship through our bilateral cooperation framework, and it's called the Greener Cities Partnership. The Greener Cities Partnership has affordable and sustainable housing and at the same time nature-based solutions as a climate resilience measure as the key theme. It's the core of this particular bilateral program between UNEP and UN Habitat. Through the Greener Cities Partnership, the two agencies are also working in Kenya on a number of different projects. For building climate resilience for the urban poor, delivery of affordable climate resilient housing is for us a social imperative. It's not only motivated by climatic concerns, it's a social imperative. Today, globally, 1.8 billion people lack adequate housing, with up to 75% of residents in rapidly growing cities living in informal settlements that do not have the basic services. The built environment drives 35% of energy-related CO2 emissions and over 1/3 of global energy demand. Residential buildings account for 3/4 of global building stock and most of the sectoral emissions. Colleagues, there are some solutions on the horizon. The Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, also called the Global ABC, that is coordinated by UNEP, is backing a transformation of the building sector. and is guiding and supporting countries and cities towards zero emission, efficient and resilient buildings and homes. We do appreciate a lot that Kenya is part of the global ABC, and having Kenya also as the co-chair of the Intergovernmental Council on Buildings and Climate, the ICBC, which held its ministerial meeting this week on 11th of November here at the COP30 in Belem. Colleagues, we are looking to be working closely together with the government of Kenya on implementing the Belem call for action. We are also looking forward for having representatives of the Kenyan government to attend the upcoming UNEA Cities and Regions Summit, which will happen actually very soon in Nairobi next month. It will be an important milestone to reflect on the outcomes of the COP30, of our collective discussions that we are having here in Belem, and also to prepare for the next crucial milestone, which is the 13th World Urban Forum in Baku, which is going to happen in May 26. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. And now it's a pleasure to invite Mr. Elken Velasquez, the Regional Director in Latin America and the Caribbean of UN Habitat, to deliver a note.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. And first of all, I want to share the message from our Executive Director, Ana Claudia Rosbach, who is following very closely this very important effort, BCRUP, under the leadership of Kenya, Brazil, and other countries, hopefully soon. And I want, first of all, deliver my first message, which is to reaffirm the commitment of UN Habitat, Ambassador, to this very important initiative. In Latin America and the Caribbean, there is a president who said, a former president who said, for the good of everyone, first the most vulnerable. And I think you have been in Kenya very visionary together with the Brazilians when you said when it comes to climate change, it is critical to put the poor at the center, the poor people at the center. And this is what BCRUP is about. So our commitment here is reaffirmed from our global units in Nairobi on housing, land, and shelter. We will continue, of course, providing all our contribution from a technical perspective. And in addition to that, Executive Director has also instructed me to put on the table that we will join efforts in the mobilization of the much needed resources. Because, of course, this is one of the key points. Those resources are financial, but also, as I am hearing around the COP30, it is also about knowledge. It is also about data. It is also about complementary partnerships. And this brings me to the second message, which is when I am seeing the wonderful achievements so far in the roadmap that is established by BCRUP, I cannot let, I'll put aside thinking what in Latin America and the Caribbean, our countries are also advancing in this regard. And I see there, in the very spirit that Brazilian presidency of the COP30 put on the table, the Mutirão, the Umoja, being together to facilitate as well the exchange between regions, the interregional conversation. So BCRUP can count from now also in this contribution from UN Habitat. We are at this very moment identifying the good experiences, the good leaders, the good processes in different regions to start advancing this conversation with Kenya. My third message is, I think we are advancing with very good news on the leadership of, from the very high level in Kenya, President Ruto, who is also championing the Housing for All initiative. Recently at the United Nations General Assembly, he conveyed a meeting with the different global leaders on Housing for All. And I think that was the signal also for UN Habitat to facilitate the convergence of BCRUP with all other efforts that are advancing at this very moment. For instance, the open-ended working group on housing that is once again led by Kenya. So my final message is that multi-round comes with convergence, and we will do every single effort in Habitat under the leadership of our host country, Kenya, and the other member states to create this convergence. Because at the end of the day, is this convergence of different efforts that will bring us to have the impacts that we want in the world. Having the urban poor, reducing their vulnerability and increasing the resilience in front of climate change. Thank you very much. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Velasquez. And now we have the honor to invite Ms. Raquel Ludamir, the Advocacy Manager of Habitat for Humanity Brazil.
Good afternoon. First of all, I wanted to apologize for my voice, but also to greet you on behalf of thousands and thousands of slum dwellers and urban poor who are outside over here just protesting on the march. And I think the message is clear that there will be no climate justice without housing justice. So I just wanted to open on that. And as Habitat for Humanity, we are working very closely with the climate and the housing agenda. And we've done a recent study that shows that only 8% of NDCs have meaningful commitments to housing and informal settlements. And even when that's the case, there is a serious misalignment between those commitments and actual finance for climate action. So I think this is a question of priorities, and I'm really happy to be here with you today on behalf of our Habitat for Humanity network. So our first message here is that simply addressing the housing crisis can be a very effective and meaningful form of climate action, because like in several studies and research that we're also doing, when we focus, let's say in Latin America, we understand that the urban poor, and in many cases the women, female-headed households and the urban poor, and with who are facing several intersectional discrimination, they are the ones experiencing the most acute housing injustice. So if we simply address, if we go back to the basics and we simply address the housing crisis, we are already doing a very important and meaningful form of climate action. My second message today is that evictions and displacements are contributing to the housing crisis, but also to the climate crisis. So in many cases, in many situations, a climate excuses are being used to displace entire communities from their homes, and this is unacceptable. So we really need to work together with communities to, first of all, work on land tenure security, slum improvements, but also incremental housing. So I think these are the three key issues that I think I'm really happy to echo here, that should be strengthened in this panel here, because otherwise we're going to be facing what we call green displacement. So people will just be pushed out from well-located areas, and this is really unacceptable. And my third and final message is that communities are already leading the way. So they are doing wonderful things on the ground. They are organizing themselves. They are finding ways to manage risk while the public policy doesn't arrive. So I think this is really something that is key. So when we're thinking about meaningful collaboration, we must include people. So it's public, private, people partnership. So I think this is my final message. And I think if we do align our climate commitments with the climate finance that we expect here, with the idea of the right to adequate housing, will not only reduce emissions and risk, but in the same sense that Elkin was saying, it's going to be better for anyone. We'll really transform lives on the ground and on the city. So by that, I just want to emphasize once more that there will be no climate justice without housing justice. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, for the closing of our session, it gives me a pleasure to invite Mr. Jean-Pierre Longbassi, the Secretary General of UCLG Africa. Jean-Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear climate colleagues and friends, I am speaking here as the Secretary General of the United States and Local Government of Africa, representing the 17,000 local authorities operating on the continent. Our organization is based in Rabat, Morocco, and is part of the global organization of United States and Local Government based in Barcelona, Spain. BCRUP is typically the kind of initiative that puts into practice the political will of leaving no one behind in the area of sustainable development, impact of climate change, and particularly on the poor neighborhood in our cities. BCRUP aims to materialize synergies between the Sustainable Development Agenda, the Climate Agenda, the Sendai Protocol, and the New Urban Agenda. And it should be considered as a rallying point to implement the Belem call for confidence in climate and resilience action, expressed strongly November earlier this week with the Vice President of Kenya in the leadership. We all know that implementing mitigation action without co-benefits in an adaptation is bad mitigation. And implementing adaptation action without co-benefits on mitigation is bad adaptation. The 20 pilot countries in Africa that joined BCRUP consider this initiative as a way to try out new areas of working with the poor urban dwellers to really improve their living condition and environment, as well as their resilience and autonomy. UCLG Africa is convinced that systematically involving and empowering communities and local authorities in climate action remains one of the best ways to achieve the desired impact in the field of adaptation to climate change, preparing population to face and cope with risks associated with climate disaster, and improving the resilience of population living in poor urban neighborhoods who unfortunately make up the majority of city dwellers in the global south. The fact that BCRUP is an initiative spearheaded directly by the UN Secretary General under the leadership of the head of state of Kenya and Brazil demonstrates the importance the UN member states attach to the need to bring the means of implementation of development and climate agenda closer to the population concerned, whose involvement is a prerequisite for the success of this initiative. BCRUP should therefore be considered a game changer for all partners who need to put the local level in on the driving seat for greater result and impact. This is why BCRUP is, above all, a community, locally, city, and country-driven initiative, with regional coordination ensuring consistency in a measurement, reporting, and verification system aligned with the MRV system in place for at the national and international level for all the agendas. Now, I want to bring to your attention an initiative that will, I hope so, change the way the finance of resilience is done. UCAG Africa wishes that the BCRUP initiative takes advantage of the Adaptation Benefit Mechanism, ABM, piloted by the African Development Bank as a result-based non-market approach under Article 6.8 of the Paris Agreement to help overcome the financial barriers to scale up adaptation and resilience projects and building resilience with the urban poor in the long run. This is a tool that can help close the gap between CAPEX investment and OPEX resources, which are key to ensure sustainability and resilience. This is the reason why UCAG Africa encourages all stakeholders to consider this new instrument proposed by the African Development Bank as an innovative approach to financing resilience in the long run. We hope that upon leaving Belem, all stakeholders will be convinced of the need to adopt BCRUP platform as a grassroots approach to climate, sustainable development, and urban management action in partnership with the population concerned, in line with our resolution to leave no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mbasi. I would like to take the opportunity to invite Professor Johannes Atrela, Executive Director of African Research and Impact Network, to deliver his speech.
Thank you very much. I know time has gone, so I want just to make some very quick comments. One is that in every room I have been in this journey of BCRUP since the last 45 years, because it's been a long journey, there is a very strong agreement and support that BCRUP is critical, BCRUP is important, and that BCRUP is one of those innovations that can really bring up or strengthen resilience in our housing system. So there's no doubt about that. There has been strong political support. I think in most of the events we've had in different COPs, even when we were launching the BCRUP implementation plan at COP28 in Dubai, we had really very high level declarations and support to the process. So I want to say that this is a critical juncture that we need to then think about how we are going to transform this political goodwill and consensus about the value of BCRUP into practice. And this is where I think science and data comes in. It's important that we unpack the BCRUP process, that we are able to understand what is it that can work, what are the particular elements or aspects of BCRUP which can be implemented in the different contexts where it needs to work. So, ladies and gentlemen, for us as the Africa Research and Impact Network, the transition from the bigger political goodwill and the good documents that underpin BCRUP into actual bankable interventions and projects is something that we are keen on. We are keen on mobilizing data because we work in 36 African countries, bringing together researchers and experts in this area. We are keen on mobilizing evidence to be able to help develop interventions that can then be implemented on the ground. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard, BCRUP is a catalytic initiative. I think one of the things that we look forward to is to mobilize all the research and knowledge partners so that we can establish an info hub where BCRUP can be the platform or the space where you are able to get information when it comes to urban resilience, not only in Kenya, but in Africa and across the world. With those few remarks, I thank you so much, and thank you everybody for supporting this journey.
Thank you very much, Professor Latello, for delivering a speech on behalf of ARIN, and it gives me a pleasure to invite, for the closing remarks, to invite Mr. Michael Lensalon, Principal Secretary of the State Department for Devolution, Kenya.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, good afternoon. What a powerful and collaborative discussion this has been. I've been keenly listening, so it's for the closing remarks, you will have to get the entire thing wrapped up, for take home. We begin this session by acknowledging that the climate battle will be won or lost in our cities. We have heard loud and clear that this battle is inseparable from the fight against poverty, the search for economic opportunity. The intervention from our partners, the UN Habitat, the World Bank, France, Brazil, and civil society, amongst others, have all converged on a few critical truths. Firstly, finance is essential, but it must reach the last mile. We must ensure that adaptation finance flows directly to the urban poor, to the informal settlements where vulnerability is greatest. Secondly, our partnership is our engine, from multi-level governance to public-private people partnerships. Collaboration is non-negotiable. Thirdly, this is about justice. Climate justice is housing justice. We cannot solve our crisis without addressing the other. In this spirit, let me conclude with 3 points. First, on behalf of the co-lead Kenya, I want to thank each of you for your unwavering commitment to the BCRUP initiative. Your pledges of political, technical, and financial support are the bedrock upon which we will build. Secondly, I reiterate Kenya's full commitment alongside Brazil to steer this initiative to success. The moment is on our side, from the strategy launched at the African Climate Summit to the adoption of the 10-year implementation plan at COP28. We are now firmly in the implementation phase, and we are moving with urgency. Finally, I call to action because the USD 6 billion required for our first decade is not just a number. It is a direct investment in climate resilience infrastructure, in affordable housing, in jobs, and in the dignity of the most vulnerable. It translates to just USD 50 per capita, a small price for transformative impact. Let us live here not just with warm sentiments, but with a hardened resolve. Let us mobilize this capital, strengthen our partnership, and empower our communities. The path to a resilient net zero carbon dioxide emission future runs directly through the streets and neighborhoods of the urban poor. Together, let us ensure it is a path of opportunity, equity, and justice for all. I thank you all.
Mr. Lenasalon, we just wanted to thank you for very firm encouragement in concluding this session, for the encouragement to continue with this important initiative. So thank you very much. And now we would like to invite everybody here in the spirit of brotherhood, sisterhood, to come for a joint picture, just so that we remember this event.